without further ado, I'd love to welcome Vodafone's Sara Heuer to the stage, please, to follow on from the fantastic journey you're on with your digital twin.
Super. Hi, everyone. Delighted to be here. Thank you so much for inviting us back. I am going to start with a question, if I may. So, if your team came to you and said, we have no capacity, no budget, but we'd really like to do something. And by the way, Sara Heuer, you cannot be involved in any of the decision making. We're going to decide what we're going to do. What would you do? So I'm just going to leave you with that question. So I grew up in shared services. And when I started in shared services, it was hard to imagine that somebody would come and ask you that question. The rules were really clear. It was quite black, it was quite white. It was very clear what the process was, what the policies were, and who was leading, and how that was going to evolve. But things changed. And I'm going to fast forward 20 years, and a lot of grey hair later, and I'm sitting in Bangalore, and I'm sitting with one of our data scientists, a guy called Manik Datta, and we're working on manual journal analytics. Now, for anyone who's an accountant, you will know this is one of the most exciting things you can do. And if you're not an accountant, believe me, it's one of the things you should volunteer to be involved in. And we're talking about manual journal analytics and what algorithms we can use. And I'm sitting there, and Manik says, I started talking to my network. I found some folks, specifically on the West Coast in the US, and they actually think the way we're trying to do this is quite good. They approve. And actually, I'm quite comfortable now as a data scientist that you can do this. And my world changes. My world pivots. Because this is the problem I thought I had to solve. And actually, this is a problem that Manik, his team, his network, and his experience were able to solve for me. So shared services at Vodafone had outgrown itself. 1 in 5 of Vodafone's employees works in shared services. That's 25,000 people. Even in the traditional spaces like HR, finance, accounting, and also purchasing, we were pushing the ground on things that we could do differently. So for us, it was time to change, and it was time to reimagine. So we went from Vodafone Shared Services to Vodafone Intelligent Solutions. You crunch that down, you get voice. The underscore is not a mistake or a typo. It's actually deliberate, because the way that we look at things is we say we underscore what Vodafone does, and we want to make sure that we are able to work and think about the future for Vodafone, but also for society and for connectivity, and making sure that we can have more people involved in the transformation that is ongoing within society. So if you go from reimagining, then we went to re-engineering. And re-engineering starts with, where am I going to focus? What am I going to do? And so for us, we have a simple thing that we look at. And a lot of this has been discussed in some of the breakouts already today. So we talk about scaling at speed. And we talk about if we scale, and if we can do that at speed, we will unlock trap value. So what does that really mean? And how can you think about that? So for us, when we look at speed, we think about the agility to do things at our customer's pace. So making sure that we are doing the same things. And so what we've done is, some of you may have the Vodafone app, where you use and you check how you're doing in terms of your minutes, you check in terms of your data, and you can also check in terms of things that you might want to do differently. We've done the same thing with our partners and the interaction with our partners. So our partners can really just get every single piece of information on how they can interact with us. Also, they get recommendations because we have 26 markets. So one market may be doing one type of service in my data and analytics practice that I have. And actually, there are some offerings there that they could opt into. We also do full transparency in terms of all of our billing through the app. And we continuously evolve those journeys. We link that into the customer satisfaction, and we use, similar to Lego, we also use NPS, and we do transactional NPS, as well as doing annual and quarterly NPS in terms of partner satisfaction. So from there, we go into scale. And when we talk about scale, we talk about what we call chasing the exponentials, right? So you're looking for opportunities where really you can take the cost down, and as you add more transactions in, your cost is really continuing to reduce, and looking at those exponential curves downwards. And when we think about scale, one of the first things you need to think about is what kind of architecture have you got, and how can that help in terms of allowing you to scale. So we have what we call our 4-part architecture. Not technical, so I'm going to try and explain it as simply as possible. So we have a data ocean. We used to have data lakes. Now we all have oceans. We use Google Cloud for that. We have a 3-part model, which is location agnostic, which focuses on AI, automation, and analytics. That's really focusing on reusability. So as we have components which we develop within the analytics space, we look at the reusability of all of those components. Then we have an end-to-end view of the processes and how we're digitizing the processes. And then we link that to our talent. And our talent is a mix of people working in the local market and in voice collaboratively for transformation for Vodafone. As we did look at how we are scaling, we did look a bit at what our physical spaces and locations are. So we used to have a hub and a spoke. We have a significant presence in Egypt. We have a presence in India. And we also are in Romania and in Hungary. And we've added 2 new types of locations. We've added satellites and skills hubs. And we've seen some really talented folks join the Voice family in the last 6 to 9 months, particularly in Manchester, Albania, and Malaga, and soon to be also in Turkey. Like everyone, we looked at our physical spaces as well, and we looked at how do you re-engineer those spaces. The work that will be done in those spaces is a different type of work, because we will have a lot of hybrid working, and so we're expecting when people come to the office, they will have more collaboration, they will have more creative work that they focus on, and we're focusing on those spaces being different spaces and making sure that that works well. As part of our transition from virtual work into what we're calling hybrid work, we've done a lot of work up front on that and a lot of change management on that, but we are very much protecting our people in the locations we're in, and so we have a very conservative and very slow approach at bringing people back into the office, and we also have a substantial population who will continue in hybrid mode or fully remote. So, speed and scale. When you combine the two, what does that do for you? I run corporate functions, and so one of the things I need to look at all the time is what is my portfolio like? And is my portfolio actually really fit for purpose, not just for today, but the day after tomorrow is what I always look to. And what we see is that there are certain things where the scaled services component of that portfolio really needs to be higher, and I'm really focused on making sure that that happens. Then I have centers of expertise. And centers of expertise are really, for me, one of my key areas that I keep looking at, because some of the areas there might not have had a platform previously, but as technology evolves, you're actually starting to see some platforms emerge. So I'm always asking, okay, could we do something there? Is there something that can make that platform enabled? And then the other piece I look at is it actually safe, secure, and compliant in that center of expertise, right? So I talk a lot at the moment around boundary controls. So am I sure that what is within this center of expertise is really well controlled from an upstream perspective, but also from a downstream perspective? And the new focus that I have, which I find really, really cool, I'm showing my age by saying the word cool, but we have a focus that's saying if somebody has worked for a long time in a center of expertise, they can potentially move into an internal consulting focus. And that's some of our newer services. And so what we do is we have a program which we call Purple People. So people at Vodafone have a red badge if you're from Vodafone. Some of the folks from Deloitte will know you get a blue badge, right? If you come into Vodafone. And so we have red and blue, which is purple, which is our reskilling program, which focuses on some of those newer types of skills that people will need if they're moving into new services in a GBS world where it's, there's more ambiguity, there's more storytelling, and we really want to make sure that they get that opportunity. So re-engineering sounds like a really technical term, but I'm sure from what I've just talked about, you'll notice that most of it is really focused on people and how do we do things differently. And how do we enable our people to really, at the right point in time, make change for Vodafone and also, in part of our purpose, for society as a whole. So there's 4 behaviors that we focus on. And these 4 behaviors are like a shortcut in terms of language. So in terms of having a universal language across 25,000 people, this is how we get there. And we also get some really helpful nudges, which tell us as leaders what we need to do differently. And those get delivered straight into our inboxes, usually 1 a month, which kind of says to you, you might want to think about how you do this a little bit differently going forward, which has really helped. I'm going to focus on 2 of these. So the 2 in the middle, create the future and experiment and learn fast. Okay. I'm outing myself as coming from Germany for anyone who actually is German. So I live in Germany, and the screen you're seeing is actually German, right? But anybody know what that screen is? Any ideas?
Google Maps.
Google Maps. Okay, all right. Google Maps. So hard to believe that when I was starting out and I went to the US, I was actually printing a lot of stuff to try and find my way across different places and different cities. Google Maps is something that we use a lot, and we use it, and what does it do? It tells us where we might want to go, when we're likely to arrive, and it also tells us things that we might want to know that are in the vicinity, right? So sometimes it might prompt you to say, actually, you could go and see this, you could go and see that, or it used to prompt me and say, don't leave Dusseldorf at X amount of 7 p.m. in the evening, wait another hour, and actually you'll arrive with a much shorter duration. So in simple terms, what Google Maps is one of the best digital twins out there. And so for us, when we think about digital twins, what we're thinking about is how do we create the equivalent of a Google map for everyone who works in Vodafone. shared services, yeah? So what we're saying is we want to enable you to have the data at your fingertips that you can actually look at what you want to do, get suggestions for how you do it differently, and do that in a way that is very low downside, right? So this is what we're trying to do. And again, I'm trying to do it as simply as possible because I'm not technical, so if there are any big technical questions, I'll probably fail massively. But we again have the famous, not a data lake, now we've got a data ocean moment, right? And we're using Google Cloud. And what we have is we have a factory which builds the twins, which is, for the most part, enabled by voice because we have a significant amount of people in our technology shared services. And the idea here is that you create a factory which creates these twins, and there's design in the symmetry here. They all need to look in or around the same. And we call these honeycombs. And these honeycombs are designed in a tight way to say, actually, each time we create a honeycomb digital twin, what happens over time is if you add up all the honeycombs, what do you get? A hive. And so you get a hive of operational twins, which are actually working together. They're working collaboratively, they're connected, and they're working in orchestration. And the idea is that you help everyone in that integrated framework of all the activity we do all work better. So that's our vision. Where are we though? Okay, so this is our first honeycomb. So our first honeycomb is live. And that first honeycomb is within our customer operations. So within the customer operations space, what you're able to do in real time is you're able to look at the performance of the team and the shift, and you're able to say, okay, I see, because it's very simple UI, I see where we are, and then what you can do is you can actually simulate and say, where will I be at the end of the day if I do nothing? And then it will say, okay, what are the actions I could take? And it'll suggest actions to you. And then over time, it will learn. It will also learn over time that possibly the leadership actions I might have come up with maybe aren't the right actions. And actually, the person with the best understanding of the data in real time will be able to make the right decisions. So we're trying to focus on a future where people are able to harness technology in a very easy, simple, intuitive way. So I talked about create the future, I talked about experiment and learn fast. We launched this change and this movement to say we want to do things differently just before COVID. And one of the things it helped us do was it helped us as we battled through COVID, and particularly on getting it done together. Because for us, and particularly our teams in India, we really had a team who was going through things that were unimaginable and unbelievable every day. And so part of what we were able to do was see how can we work together, and what does that mean, and how do we put everything aside and say, how can we focus on somehow getting through this as a team? And managing that remotely is not easy, because a lot of what you have to do is really just listen and practically work out, is there anything I can do for someone today? And sometimes all you were able to do was listen. Sometimes all you were able to do was cry with them as they were going through some really, really tough circumstances. But what has been amazing has been the resilience of the team. And what has been amazing is how the team created structures that we couldn't have conceived of. So we had a volunteer set of people who said, let's run an internal helpline for anyone who's not sure about where to go, for anyone who may need oxygen, for anyone who may need medication, for anyone who's looking for blood transfusions. And that team worked tirelessly, but that team also worked in a very caring way, which was amazing to watch and amazing to see. Virtual work, I distinguish from virtual work versus hybrid work, because virtual work, we were kind of put into it. So we were kind of pushed, everyone was kind of pushed into it through the pandemic. What we found was it was surprisingly smooth. So the initial phases when we were thinking about and watching things, we were saying, okay, are we really doing this as well as we can? And some of what we did there was surveying, and surveying with a lot of opportunity for people to write their comments. And one of the things in the initial phases I used to do was I used to wait until the end of the day, get a big coffee, and then sit down and read those comments. And one time I got, I think, 1,300 comments. And for every 5 that are great, you get 1 which makes you sit there and think, oh, we need to do better. And I need to do better. And that's part of why I'm talking about me as a leader and how I do things and how I think about how I work. So one of the things, the examples there is, we have a lot of people who were balancing and trying to manage caregiving, trying to manage feeding a household, trying to manage homework, remote schooling. And so one of the things that we were able to do is start to normalize some of that and start to normalize how do you do that, what does that look like, and then start to make it something that we can talk about. So one of the funny things my team always talks about is my cooking, which is non-existent, right? And so part of what they would always say is, okay, but Sarah, we know you don't cook, yeah? But who's feeding? Who's feeding them? Who's feeding the family today? And how is that working? And those are the moments where you change. And those are the moments where you also think about leadership in a very different way. And what I see as one of the things that has emerged is the way we lead and what people are looking for from us as leaders has changed. And some of what we've got to do is think about ourselves and think about how we contribute there. In terms of change management, we were a bit surprised that some of the things that had been projects that were in flight before the pandemic hit, they got very wobbly. Whereas the things that actually started in the pandemic, they were much more smooth. So we kind of had one of those moments where we thought all the stuff that was, in flight would actually be much more smooth as it evolved, but it didn't. So we had to learn from there. So as we're working through this really, really tough phase, Vodafone is really stepping into supporting society through the pandemic. And we talk about purpose, and we talk about how people are craving for something that is bigger than themselves and being involved in that. One of the proudest moments I've had was just watching how we were able to deal with the load on the networks, and watching how teams were able to put in 70% more capacity in such a short time frame, and just to watch the people from Italy who took all the learnings that happened in Italy and were making sure that all the other markets understood them, and just how everyone worked together to try and make sure we were doing the right thing in terms of providing public information, making sure people could access public information for free, and also trying to support as much as we could with data insight and also on critical services and support. So in terms of how we as Voice were going through the pandemic, one of the things that is incredible for our teams is that they were also able to support, as Vodafone was supporting society through the pandemic. So from re-engineering, we'll go to renew and refresh. What is renew and refresh? Renew and refresh, in its simplest form, is making sure that those 25,000 people can jump on the S-curves to grow whenever they get the opportunity. And our role is to make sure that we're giving them lots of S-curves so that we can transform society as well as Vodafone. So my last moment is to go back to my question. I did have a team who came and said to me, we want to do something. And what they did was they created their own platform, which they call Team X. In Team X, the work that would otherwise not get done is bid on. And people volunteer because they want to learn. So all the way from building analytical products we otherwise would not have been able to do, to landscape maturity assessments, to actually, the most interesting one, they took all the publicly available data for the Indian Cricket League and helped people understand how you could learn advanced analytics by actually taking that data and seeing what would happen in the Indian Cricket League. So, we've reimagined. We're re-engineered soon. And from there, we'll keep renewing and refreshing. Because the world never stands still, but neither do we. We are a voice. Come move with us. Thank you.
Sara, thank you so much. That was extremely fascinating and very inspiring. It's fantastic to have you here and hear about the digital twin and how you've really come so far on your journey, certainly since we heard from Gary as well last year. Now, you spoke a bit about the pandemic. One of my favorite things I used to do with the team was Deliveroo Roulette. If you've not tried it, highly recommended. You never know what you're going to get for dinner, but it was a lot of fun. I believe, Sara, you're now going over to our studio.
Super.
With Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Candice. And we heard about Renew and Reimagine. Go over to the Wellbeing Zone. I had a great reception there at lunchtime. Lots more that you can do in terms of renewing and reimagining. So how did it go while I was away, Punit?
It went really well. I quite enjoyed it, actually.
Great. I heard that you did a fantastic job. They said I may not even need to come back, but I'm glad to be back here with you in the studio.
Sure. That's happening anytime soon. I'm staying with the day job. Thank you very much.
Great. And Sara is just joining us here in the studio, and I hear that you've got some great questions lined up for Sara.
I do have some great questions. We've had some questions coming in from the audience, but I'm told we are a little bit short on time, so it might be just a few.
Okay.
I think what she was talking about. Sara, there you are.
Welcome, Sara.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us in the studio. That was a really great presentation.
Thank you.
So I guess so many questions to ask you. That was so interesting. I think the first thing that jumped out to me was your penetration into the organization. You talked about 25% of Vodafone is in your organization. How did you go about driving that?
Well, I'd like to say I had a lot to do with it, but that's not the case. So I think, our group CFO, Margherita Della Valle, she started shared services. And I think it's been on a journey over the years. I think there are a couple of things. I think we have some really great connection between all the teams. So this idea that the teams are separate is really not discussed a lot. So,
right.
So that really helps in terms of what you can imagine. And I think also the successes have a bit of a domino effect. So you get this kind of pull. So I particularly have a data and analytics practice, and that data and analytics practice is like an amazing pull, because there might be something that's going on in terms of fraud, security, and in terms of an analytical asset, and then that opens up another conversation.
Right.
I think a part of it is being very close to and understanding the business. And then the second piece, which is, you can't really replace, is just passion, right? If you're going to be passionate about what you do, we have amazing people, and we have people who are also not too shy at coming forward, which also really helps.
That is fantastic. It sounds like the embodiment of the center office, GBS as a service kind of thing, I guess. Another thought that was occurring to me, I guess, was you talked about the voice brand and about how you changed the brand. Tell me why you changed that brand and what impact it had.
Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest things that my boss, Gary Adey, wanted to do. So when he started, he would talk a lot about it, and he went through a whole real deep process of trying to understand that. And it really was, how do you make sure that this is going to be one of the most attractive places for people to work? It also was about coming out of the shadows, so that it's about the identity. The brand is very nice, but the piece is around the identity and about the strength of, if you want to work here, you need to be really clear, this is an awesome place. You're going to be in the light, in the focus, and you can help transform. And that, I think, is part of the change. And it's really nice because we've gone from launching it now to actually people starting to recognize it. And we're starting to see a lot of talent who are saying, I'd really like to come and join for voice, even in some of the more traditional areas, because actually I think you are thinking about transformation and technology.
Fantastic, fantastic. I know I've got loads more questions to ask you, perhaps offline.
Super.
Chris?
Yeah, as always, unfortunately, we just don't seem to have enough time. The next speaker is lined up. So thank you again for your time. I love the energy that you brought to the stage as well. And I'm certainly going to be going back over your presentation and looking at it in more detail. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you.